First off, I'd like to welcome everyone to the MMRC and GOP primary candidate debate. We got a couple of just house things first. We have an LRDD update from GOP. Sarah?
Wanted to invite everybody and thank the Mint Hill Matthews Republican Club for hosting this. We're happy to partner with the Mecklenburg County Republican Party. Next Thursday, we are having our annual Lincoln Reagan Douglas dinner, and our guest keynote is RNC Committee Chairman Ronna McDaniel. So we're very excited about that, to get the head of the RNC to come in, and we'll also be joined by Senator Tillis, by Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest, and by former Governor McCrory. So that will be next Thursday. You can get tickets at mecgop.com. They're still available. These are normally, if you want to go to one of those types of star-studded dinners, they're usually about $10,000, and they're $100 for our dinner. So be a great event, and hope everybody can come out.
Okay, thank you for that update. We originally had another candidate, Dan Bishop, who unfortunately had a vote today, and just reading a very brief statement, his wife, Jill.
Oh, I cannot see. Hey guys, I'm not used to doing this, so I'm going to use little notes here. I'm Joe Bishop. I know a gang of you in the audience, and first of all, we want to say, I'd like to take a moment and just a moment of quiet or prayer or whatever for our folks that were impacted up at UNCC. I'm sure everybody has heard there was a shooting up there within the last hour. So if we could just take a moment and recognize our thoughts and prayers with those victims. Okay, I wanted to let you, I'm not going to talk but just for 2 seconds here, or about 120 seconds maybe, if anything, but Dan really regrets that he couldn't be here tonight. He really was planning on being here. He had driven to Raleigh yesterday and was going to come back today for this forum, but things got very urgent that he stay up there. So tonight, I'm proud to say and happy to announce that Dan cast the deciding vote that led the Senate override Governor Cooper's deplorable veto of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Every vote in this on the Senate side was critical. They needed 30 people to pass, and the vote passed 30 to 20. So if Dan had been here, it would not have passed. So I think you'll agree that we can let him skip tonight with that. As you know, Dan's always fought to protect life because he believes life is a gift from God. So Dan asked me to let you know how much he appreciates what this Mint Hill and Matthews group have done for Republicans in Mecklenburg County. You guys have all been so helpful to him over the years. You've helped him clinch his last election last fall over a Democrat, as well as to clinch a primary last spring against someone who was really posing as a Democrat. Dan has asked if you want to talk to him about any of the issues that are discussed tonight to please call him. I was supposed to bring cards with his cell phone numbers on them, and I left them at home, I do admit, but if you need a cell phone number and don't have it, he's putting it out there everywhere. It is 704-619-7580, and he'll be glad to discuss any kind of issue or question that's brought up tonight that you want clarification on. So, of course, I'm a little biased. I believe Dan's the conservative that you need who can beat Dan McCready this fall. My Dan is the right Dan to represent us in Congress. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. We are going to get started. We have a great group of candidates up here, and I encourage everyone to listen, learn their policies, and just be really intent on their intent to be your congressman or woman for the 9th District. At this point, I'd like to go over the quick rules of the debate. The rules are as follows. The candidate will be brought up in pairs. They will be asked 2 questions by the moderator. They will be asked the same question by the moderator. Each person will be given a minute to respond. So candidate A will be given a minute, then candidate B will be given a minute to that same question, and then candidate A will have a 30 seconds response. The 2 questions, they will alternate, so candidate B will answer the second question first, and candidate A will answer the first question first. Every candidate will have the opportunity to face each other during this debate. They will have a minute introduction period and then a 2-minute closing statement. And with that, I'd like to introduce the moderators debate this evening, Tony Long. Tony? Thank everyone.
Thank you and welcome to the Miguel Matthews event tonight, and we will get started. So we'd like to ask candidate 1 and 2 to approach the podium, please. Okay, ready? Okay, you each go ahead with, we'll start with candidate, the podium to my left. You get 1 minute to open and then we'll rotate over. Go ahead, no, just a minute about yourself.
Opening statement.
My name is Gary Dunn. My grandfather has a sign on his desk. It says, if you see something wrong and you do nothing, you commit the crime. So you should take action every time you see something wrong. My objective in entering this race is because I see something wrong and this is my action.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Matthew Ridenauer. I'm many things to many people. To my wife, I'm husband. To my kids, Caroline and Hobson, I'm daddy bear. I'm a risk manager at my employer. Formerly, I was a United States Marine, served for 11 years in the United States Marine Corps, twice volunteered to go to Iraq. To others, I'm an Eagle Scout that earned the rank of Eagle with them and went through the scouting program. But to all of you, and to those who have followed me on and saw what I did as a county commissioner for 6 years here in Mecklenburg County, you know that I'm also conservative Republican. I'm running because I think that my story, our conservative values have a place in Washington, D.C., and is needed in Washington, D.C. to confront the threats that we are seeing in our nation today. Matthew Ridenauer, voteridenauer.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Two more. Everyone gets, okay. So candidate 3 and 4, please.
Good evening, I'm Lee Brown. I am a realtor of 19 years. I am a mom of 2 middle schoolers at the same time. And I am the wife of Steve. We've been married for 15 years. We met playing City League softball in Charlotte. I went to Carolina back when there were 21 college Republicans, which is probably twice as many as there are now. And I am proud to be a North Carolinian, and I'm proud to be a conservative woman. I feel that in today's political climate, women are painted as one particular type of person with one set of beliefs and one something that they're supposed to be. And I find that being an independent thinker is a really good thing in life, and to set an example for my kids to show them that it's okay to be pro-life, that it's okay to have a traditional standard Christian home that goes to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and if it's open on other days, we might show up then too. And that we can also run a successful business at the same time. I put my name in the hat because I feel it's going to take an outsider, a successful conservative businesswoman, to beat Dan McCready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Tony Rushing. I apologize, I have laryngitis today. Lee gave me some magic pills, so hopefully that'll help me. It's either a lozenge or a laxative. So I'm a shooting range owner. We teach concealed carry classes. We have 2 federal firearms dealer licenses. And I'm a Union County Commissioner. I just got reelected to my 3rd term. You know, I can talk like Alice Woodhouse, but I just can't talk like myself. Sorry about this. I know it's hard to bear. But I would like ask for your vote tonight. I have a very good chance of beating Dan McCready. In Union County, I had 18,301 more votes than Dan McCready did in November election. And I think it's a travesty what happened to our vote last November. I think that Mark Harris won the election fair and square, and I think that this was taken from us, and I intend to get it back. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all. Candidates 5 and 6, please.
My name is Fern Schubert, and it's hard to imagine looking out at this audience. When I moved back home to North Carolina, when my husband retired from the military, from the Pentagon, I moved into a county that was so Democrat that they couldn't find anybody to run as a Republican. They had to be desperate, so they came to me and asked me to run for the North Carolina House. I'm like, I've never held office, run for office, expressed an interest. You guys gotta be desperate. Well, nobody else will do it. Oh, great, could there be a reason? Well, yeah, you don't have a chance in the world of ever winning. I like a challenge. Sometimes I'm an overachiever. I helped build the Republican Party in Union County in North Carolina to the point that in Union County, people don't run as Democrats anymore. It's sometimes a problem. I spent a lot of years in Raleigh representing Union County, and when I got to the Senate, part of Mecklenburg County in the legislature. And I got some amazing things done. I think I could in Congress.
I'm Stevie Rivenbark, and first of all, I want to welcome the few Democrats we have in the room. Welcome, because there's nothing to be ashamed of here. We're all proud conservatives. I am running for office because I am a single mother of 2 young children, ages 3 and 5. I am a healthcare professional. I've actually opened and managed outpatient hospital facilities for several years and served as a consultant for the Department of Defense and their Special Operations Forces. I'm here today because the left wants to take away our guns, they want to take away our voice, they want to silence our faith, they want to make us a socialist country, and I'm here to tell you today, we are never going to allow the United States of America to be a socialist country. It's too important. I'm running for Congress because I want to ensure that my children have just as bright of a future and just as great of America as I inherited. Thank you.
Okay, candidates 1 and 2, please. All right, we'll start with the one on the left. Your question, how do you see America's international role in current alliances over the coming years? And who are our best allies and why?
Could you read that question again?
Certainly. How do you see America's international role in current alliances over the coming years, and who are our best allies and why?
I'd like to pass on that.
Okay. Mr. Ridenhour?
Thank you very much. I really applaud what President Trump has been doing with foreign policy over the last couple of years. He's been pushing to get our trade partners, some of whom are not necessarily friendly with us all the time. He's working to get them at the table so that we can negotiate for better terms in trade. Why is that important? Well, it's actually a very popular opinion. That mindset was very popular back in the late 1700s when those upstart colonists revolted against Great Britain. They believed that it was best to achieve world peace by trading with many and alliances with few. Now that said, there is a place to have alliances with friendly nations around the world. So our best allies, of course, number 1 would be our longest standing ally, La France, and then number 2, those with whom we have a special relationship, Great Britain.
Thank you. Candidate A, do you have a to rebut?
No rebuttal.
Okay. We'll start with candidate B then. Do you support term limits for Congress and why?
Yes, I do. I actually signed the United States Term Limit Pledge about a month ago, which is in support of 3 terms for House of Representatives, members of the House, and 2 terms for members of the U.S. Senate. A lot of folks will say that, well, term limits are ultimately decided at the ballot box. We all, as individuals, have the opportunity to vote on who we want to see in office, and if people should choose to continue to elect someone, that's their choice. If they choose instead to term limit someone against that politician's will, then that's okay as well. That is a fair argument, but I think as we can all admit in this day and age, there is certainly a power to incumbency. There is a power of being able to raise funds, to build a network quickly, to be able to scare off opponents, right? All these things make it very difficult for a challenger against an incumbent. So much so that very rarely does an incumbent lose. Of course it happens, but it's the exception, not the rule. So yes, in short, I am in favor of term limits.
Thank you. Candidate A.
Every single elected job has a little caveat at the end. It says, this job is for, that's the term limits. The original concept of this is that you take the job, you do it, and then you go home. You don't go from one job to another and continue this your entire life. Go to Washington, go to Raleigh, do a job, and then go home. I believe in term limits, but strict term limits. Not you take one job, and then you take another job, and then you take another job, and you float around Washington or Raleigh your entire life as a career politician.
You have
That's good, thank you.
okay. All right, and then we will take candidate 3 and 4 next, please. Okay. First question. China has been gaining influence in the east of Africa. Is this something the U.S. should be worried about? If so, what would you do to prevent it?
One of the priorities in the United States budget has to be our military spending and a policy that keeps our military fighting men and women properly equipped to take action if so needed. Now, I do believe that our spending could be renegotiated on some of the bloated contracts, but the best way to keep another power at bay is to have a strong offense at the ready.
Very good.
Thank you very much. One of our most important allies in the world is Israel. Will be from now on. We have to keep and maintain a strong working relationship with Israel, and that will help us in the situation with China and everyone in the Middle East. If we do that and we watch what we're spending, we can't continue to get into wars in every little place and try to police the world. We have to work hard to make sure that our military is prepared. I grew up in the 80s watching television that was showing us where the missiles were going to land. I know what Ronald Reagan did when he showed us peace through strength works, and it does work. So keeping a strong military absolutely is going to help us prevent anything from happening in the future. It's just like when we go out, if you have your concealed carry permit, violent crime has dropped tremendously because people don't want to get shot. Other countries don't want to be destroyed by a strong American military. So strong military and working with Israel would solve that problem.
Do you have anything else? Okay. Second question to candidate 4. Has the federal government exceeded its constitutional role? If so, in what ways?
We're seeing more and more that our federal government is trying to step on our rights. If you go home tonight and watch television, you're going to see what's happening in Venezuela. We have the Second Amendment. This is a rock. That's what they have. Go home and watch them throw these rocks at people with guns and see how effective that's going to be to protecting their rights. That's why we have it. That's why we have to protect it. And it prevents us from starvation and the situation that's going on in countries like Venezuela. So it's very important that we keep track of our government, that they don't trample on the Constitution.
The government has overstepped its bounds in many ways, one of which is the Patriot Act, which is currently collecting information on everyday citizens without their consent.
The government needs to be out of the way of private citizens and their individual liberty and freedom. That would also include the Department of Education, which has overstepped its bounds. States and local school boards should be able to decide how education is done for their citizens and the students that are under their care. Items like Common Core have damaged our system tremendously when we should be focused on classical education. Another example of federal overreach would be the current Equality Act being discussed in the House of Representatives, which would take women's rights away. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that women and men are built differently, and to say that Title IX is no longer relevant hurts my daughter's chances of ever succeeding in life.
Okay, do you have a follow-up comment? Okay, then we'll ask candidates 5 and 6, please. Okay, candidate 5. What should be our policies regarding extremism in the Middle East?
One would hope we would do everything we can to stamp it out with the help of our allies. We do have allies in that region, and despite the rising tide of anti-Semitism that you wonder where it's coming from, we actually are starting to see Israel get along with some of the surrounding countries. We have to distinguish who are our friends and who are our enemies, and distinguish based on their actions, not their words.
First and foremost, I'm from the home of Special Operations in the 82nd Airborne, HUA, and I have to say that what we need to do first and foremost is to revise the AUMF, or the Authorization for Use of Military Force. It was drafted after 9/11 attacks. Many of the terrorist groups that are listed in the AUMF in terms of where our covert operations will be focused upon, those are outdated. Some of them no longer exist. So I'm all for using special operations, CAG, special forces units, but we need to ensure that we're sending them into places with a clear, direct intent, and so we need to really start by revising the AUMF.
Very good. Do you have any further comment?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll ask candidate 2 and 3 to approach the podiums, please.
I got confused my number here.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my fault. My error. I apologize. That's my fault. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, but I didn't ask the second question. That's my error. Sorry. Okay. And I'll address this one. We'll start with Ms. Rivenbark. Do you believe Social Security is in danger? If so, how do you plan on fixing it?
Started this campaign, it was one of the items that I was fixated on the most, because as a millennial, I'm very concerned with the fact that by the year 2035, the Social Security Administration expects that at least 24% of those reaching retirement age will not receive their allotted benefits. So I am all for a privatized retirement plan that will take a process, but I believe not only will that assist with our spending as a nation, where 50% of our spending goes to retirement services and Medicare and Medicaid. We can reduce spending by pursuing those privatized plans. We can also give people like myself and future generations more control over their retirement by pursuing those privatized options.
Thank you.
And the way you do, I think, I know, if we do not do something, it is going to break. And that prediction has been out there, and it's been coming for quite some time. And at best, we have kicked the can down the road. We may have dodged a bullet in that, according to Obama, 1% growth was the new normal. According to Trump, 3% may be the new minimum. The only way to deal with debt as crushing as what we have been foolish enough to accumulate is to grow our way out of it. And we are going to have to look at Social Security, but I think we have to start by saying the government needs to keep the promises made to those at the end of their span who are heavily reliant on it. We can't start by scaring the old folk, and some may say I'm one of them. I'm not personally concerned about it. I knew that this mathematically was going to happen if we didn't do something. But I think we have to be very careful when we talk about privatization. Yes, there are other countries that have shown a privatized retirement system can give a better return to our young people, but we just need to balance the rhetoric as we explore how we make a system that works for everybody instead of a massive intergenerational transfer that we cannot sustain in its present form.
Okay.
We can keep our promises though, and we have to.
Okay, thank you. You have time for rebuttal if you'd like. You're okay? Okay? All right, now we'll ask candidates 2 and 3. Thank you for being so gracious. Okay. Starting with a podium, what is your ideal tax plan?
As few taxes as possible. I think if you repeal the 16th Amendment and get rid of the income tax, you could really accomplish a lot. The government has totally overreached its bounds on taxation, and just because I'm successful doesn't mean the government should be entitled to the fruits of my hard labors.
Thank you very much. Great question. I think that ideal, first off, let me just go ahead and throw it out there that taxation is theft. It is the theft of your hard-earned dollars. Regardless of whether it's being used for the greater good, it is being taken from you with the threat of force. That said, the ideal tax plan would be a flat tax where everyone pays an equal share into the system. That is the ideal tax plan, I believe. It's the most fair and equitable amongst all folks. As a county commissioner, I've certainly dealt with property tax increases. I never, of course, voted for any of them. Sales tax increases, of course, I never voted for any of them. But you see how these tax increases affect people. You know, they affect them on their home, and if they don't pay it, they lose their home. It affects them with sales tax because that's a regressive tax. Hurts disproportionately the poor and the working poor. So I think, given all of that in my experiences, the flat tax is the way to go. Thank you.
Okay, now you have a rebuttal? Nothing, Ms. Brand. Okay. Now, going to Mr. Ridenhour, what should be the federal role in health care?
Federal role in healthcare. What a great question. I do not think that the federal government has a constitutionally mandated place in healthcare. I think the exception to that would be with the VA, which is a core passion issue of mine, VA reform. We have 22 veterans every day who are committing suicide, many of them in the VA parking lots, some of them in the VA healthcare facilities themselves. They're not getting the care that they not deserve, the care that they have earned. So I would say that the exception to that would be for VA and taking care of our veterans. But otherwise, there is no role in the federal government constitutionally for healthcare. The left continues to try to push the narrative that we need single payer, or that perhaps Medicare for all was the answer that we need. However, we're looking at what's going on in the VA healthcare system. Is that working? No, it's fraught with problems and issues, right? So how can they possibly say we need to have single payer or Medicare for all when we can't even get the health care for our veterans correct? I say we cannot. It's a leftist pipe dream.
Okay, Ms. Brand.
The government has yet to show us that they can manage anything efficiently or effectively and also manage innovation in a marketplace. Healthcare should be a free market item so that you and I know what we pay for doctors and procedures, that we have full transparency on availability. And what you'll find is that the free market, when you look at what's happened in the technology sector, for example, is amazing when it comes to innovation and research and development and ways that make our lives better. When you look at the cost bloat that comes in with government items, I'll give you this example. LASIK is a free market healthcare item, roughly $2,000 per eye. Breast enhancement, also a free market item, roughly $3,700 per boob. Knee replacement, put Medicare into it, you got $49,000 per knee. You can see that these are free market items, the cost is driven down, you have doctors that compete for the business, and the consumer gets far better care.
Mr. Ridenhour.
Sure, I'll add to that, please. When we look at the cost of healthcare with the federal government, it's done nothing but drive up the cost of healthcare for Americans. And we see that time and time again. When we look at something like the cost of medicine or anything that we've experienced over the last better part of a decade through Obamacare, it has not been helpful towards driving up or driving down the cost of healthcare. It's in fact driven it upwards. I don't think we can look at the federal government to a solution, but rather the private marketplace, things like selling of insurance across state lines and things of that nature. That ultimately, competition is what will drive down the price of healthcare in this country, not the top-down approach from the federal government.
Okay, thank you very much. We'd like to ask candidates 4 and 5, please. Okay. First question would be, what specific policies would you implement to lower health care costs in the U.S., Ms. Schubert?
It goes back to something that some of the people right before us were talking about. What is the federal government doing in health care? Or what is the federal government doing in education? It seems like the federal government can't do something as simple as securing the southern border, and yet they are going to completely take over every area of domestic policy. I don't have the desire to grow the federal government. I think we have a federal debt far more than we have any need for. And I'm not aware, you could do things within the realm of what the government's supposed to be doing. For example, what Trump did with the VA. We have a responsibility to those veterans. And he said, we're going to get rid of the waiting list. We will give you some choices. We have some responsibilities with Medicare and Medicaid. Right here in North Carolina, you can see our state treasurer trying to get some pricing transparency.
Okay.
I think it would be very appropriate for the federal government to say on programs using federal funds, we'd like some pricing transparency.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rushing.
Thank you. My father helped a man have surgery who had a hernia, and the cost of that surgery in cash was $1,400. I went in for that same surgery with insurance, and they wanted to charge my insurance company $9,000. Therefore, I had to pay $1,700, and my deductible had already been met, just to get the same surgery that my father paid $1,400 in cash for another man. This is ridiculous. When the penalty went away, we went on to a medical program that we pay per month, concierge medical, and it's great. If we need to go get an x-ray, we know how much it's going to be. If we need medicine, we know how much it's going to be. Our insurance company doesn't get overbilled so they can negotiate something else so that I can pay higher than I would in the first place. We have to get government out. The free market is key. And when people go to the hospital, they get taken care of. And we help. Nobody's being turned away from all these things. There are organizations and charities that can help too.
Thank you. Ms. Schubert, do you have any follow-up to that? Okay. Then we'll address this to Mr. Rushing first. The 9th District is one of the poorest counties in North Carolina. As such, what policies would you advocate to enrich your constituents?
And the best policy is economic development. I've lived in Robinson County. I've lived in Scotland County. I have a home there. We pay well over $1 in property taxes in that county because all the companies moved away. When those companies start moving away, here we just go work somewhere else. In Union County, we train them at the community college to go work at another job. There, it devastates the communities. And we need a congressman that understands that and will do everything in their power to help fight for economic development, not only here, but there as well. Education is key. Being able to pass a drug test is key. Securing our border to keep those drugs from coming across, that's going to help those communities. If you have education, strong schools, and strong education that those folks can read, that's what employers look for. They want to know that can you read, can you write, and can you pass a drug test? And if you do those things, and those communities can do those things, we will attract companies to the 9th District, and that's what we should do.
Ms. Schubert.
When I moved back to North Carolina, when my husband retired, I looked around and said, what happened? Where'd the money go? I later was able to get the numbers together and prove that Union County was dead last in the state in per capita road funding, and the rest of the 9th District wasn't a whole lot better off. We paid taxes, we didn't get the return on that investment. It went other places because nobody was minding the store. I started a project when I was in the legislature. I called it the Prosperity Project, interstate from Asheville to Charlotte to Wilmington. I have a clip somewhere in my office. North Carolina is really not too smart. They built all the interstates north-south to take business out of the state. If you had an interstate from Charlotte to Wilmington, you wouldn't have that much poverty. But the Prosperity in Charlotte can't get past the Monroe parking lot for years. I'm very proud of the fact that we finally got the bypass. It should not have been a toll road. We got the Death Highway fixed in Union County, so most people don't even know it's called the Death Highway. And I even got a stoplight for Forest Hills High School. We need somebody who will actually work to get us our fair share. Not trying to be greedy, but if we pay taxes, I want my money back proportionately.
Thank you, Mr. Rustin.
Vern made a real good point about infrastructure. Believe it or not, the students that get laptops in Union County, all the students in the West are in pretty good shape, but over where I live near Anson County, a lot of the students can't use those laptops because their families can't afford internet. They can go home, they have to go to a store, to a McDonald's, somewhere that they can get to use the internet. So internet is not only key for education, but it's also going to be key for small business and economic development.
Thank you. Okay, we'd like to ask candidate 1 and candidate 3, please. Ms. Brent, student debt and education costs are on the rise. How, if at all, should the federal government address these concerns?
The universities need to be held to account for issuing bad degrees. If it costs the same thing for someone to get a degree in mechanical engineering and then the same degree in, well, what we like to call it Chapel Hill underwater basket weaving studies, that's a problem because we have students taking on an inordinate amount of debt for degrees that won't lead to jobs that are commensurate with what they've spent and that will bring that lifetime growth. So instead of these proposals that we're hearing from the far progressive left of wipe out all student debt, make college free, the colleges are sitting on massive endowments. Their costs have gone way beyond the rate of inflation, but they need to be competitive with what they're teaching our students. And we also need to make sure that the messaging says college doesn't have to be for everyone. The federal government has been part of this messaging that says everyone should go to four-year college, and I disagree with that because we have a lot of people who have skills in other places besides academia.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, could you read the question again?
Yes, sir. Student debt and education costs are on the rise. How, if at all, should the federal government address these concerns?
Well, let's see, I've been in school now for 28 years, going on 29. I'm still in school. I owe more money than I would probably be able to pay back in 40 or 50 years, but I don't care because I'll probably still be in school in 40 or 50 years from now. The loans that students take out afford them to go to school. Some of them couldn't go to school without them. I guess I probably could have paid for all of it up front, but why? When you're borrowing money from the government to go to school, it's not real money. And I know some people say, well, I'll be paying it back. Really? I have one student at one teacher at Central Piedmont Community College that owes several $100,000 for his degree. He complains about it, that his teacher's salary will never help him get back that. Well, maybe not.
Okay, thank you. Comments further? Okay, then we'll direct this to Mr. Dunn. What issues, if any, do you have with the progressive tax system we have?
Let's define progressive taxes. The more you make, the more you get to pay. Everybody agree with that? I think that's probably right. If you're making more money, you should be paying as much money as you can afford. Every once in a while, somebody comes to my kitchen, sits down at my kitchen table and says, hey, Gary, I have a way to get you through so you don't have to pay any taxes. And I tell them, hey, I have a way to get you out of my room. It's the door. You can leave now. You should pay the amount of taxes that you are comfortable with and can afford. People that make more money should absolutely pay more taxes.
Ms. Brown?
The Bible says that what belongs to Caesar is Caesar and what belongs to God is God's, and God tells me to give him the first 10% as a tithe. Nowhere in the Bible does it tell me that the government's entitled to the rest of it, and that would currently be the plan coming from the progressive left. I do believe Matthew Ridenhour is on point with the flat tax. If I can't have my way of getting rid of the 16th, then we have to have something that's more fair. Because I'll tell you, as a small business owner, when I'm able to keep more dollars, I'm not putting them in the mason jar in the backyard or hoarding them or taking a bath with them. What I do is go spend them in this community. I get my children additional art lessons, and I hire more employees, and I do more advertising for my real estate listings. In the past 2 years, since President Trump passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, my corporate taxes went down, and I've been able to add 2 more employees to my firm, which has allowed me to continue to grow the local economy, because I do believe in hiring local people and not hiring offshore. So when you tax the top, you harm people in the lower stations. However, we should also address the regressive taxes going on and be careful that we are taking care of the ones who need one more lift up before they hit the next level.
Mr. Dunn, anything else on that? Okay, thank y'all. We'll ask candidates 2 and 4, please. Okay, start with Mr. Ridenhour. How much should the federal government be involved in the public education system?
I don't think there's a role for the federal government in public education. I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. Rush.
I agree. You're back. Federal government, you know, I have a 13-year-old daughter that just came through Common Core, and when I can't help her do math, and I can do a budget for Union County taxpayers, we've got a huge problem. We need local control of education.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll direct the second question to you, Mr. Russian. Do you think we are heading into a trade war with China? Should we be worried?
In the 9th District, we must be worried about it. The 9th District is full of agricultural products that depend on strong trade. One of the largest pork producers in the world, Smithfield Foods, is located in the 9th District. We definitely have to do something. More importantly, we have to stand behind our president. What hurts us on these trade wars is when we have people playing politics with the Democrats and Republicans and fighting against our president. He knows what he's doing. I think he's proved that over the years. And we need to stand behind him in the decision he makes, and we need to work with him. Any weakness in that spurs on this to be just a longer process. So it's very important, again, that we don't have trade wars, but when we do, we need to fight them to win. And that's my opinion.
Mr. Brown.
I think if we continue on the present course, then yes, we are headed towards one. I'm hopeful that we can get them to the table and find a solution that doesn't result in a trade war. We've got we have weapons at our disposal when it comes to a trade war with China or any other nation for that matter. One weapon would be tariffs. I'm not in favor of tariffs. Tariffs ultimately are paid by the U.S. consumer. If we place a tariff on Mexican avocados, it's not Mexico that pays the tariff. I mean, yes, they do initially, but then they raise the price of those avocados when they export them to the United States, and we wind up paying for those tariffs in the form of higher avocados. Now, that said, it is still a tool that brings people to the table. And I think that from the conversations I've had with folks across the 9th, I spoke with some folks in the U.S. cotton industry last week, folks are willing to give the administration and the president a pretty long leash with the tariffs because they want to see how it plays out. And I think that's a wise strategy to give him the opportunity to use and leverage the tariffs for the time being. Hopefully, though, they'll bring conclusion and resolution to this issue prior to an all-out trade war.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, follow-up? Okay, thank y'all. If Candidate 3 and candidate 5, please. Ms. Schubert, what is your opinion on Brexit and our foreign relations with the UK?
The people spoke over there, and the leaders of that country didn't like what they heard. So they are having an internal difficulty over whether the will of the people, as expressed in the ballot box, is going to prevail. And I personally have no idea, but I'm sort of the view that when the people speak, the people that they elect to represent them are supposed to listen instead of saying, well, y'all just didn't know what we're doing. We ought to get to keep voting until we get the answer we like. Sort of like with the last U.S. election, where some people didn't like the fact that Trump won, and we should just keep harassing him till he goes up and goes away, or to prison, or whatever they have in mind. I think that should Brexit ever be going forward, we would have a good trade relationship with Great Britain. And I don't see it as something that the United States needs to get into the middle of.
Thank you. Ms. Brandon.
The people did speak, and it was so painful for the leadership that the Prime Minister resigned. And you had a great turnover in Parliament because there is a distinct gap between the populace and the elected class. It was never intended to be that way. Those who are elected to be representatives are supposed to be just that, representatives, not a special class of elites who get to do whatever they want, even if it's painful. When you look at how the EU came into being, you realize that it was designed to bleed the strong countries dry on behalf of the weak ones who didn't want to have good policies. That's what we're seeing here with the rise of socialism. It only works until, as Margaret Thatcher said, you run out of someone else's money. And I believe the people of Great Britain just had enough, and with their votes and with their voices, they should be heard. Even if it's a painful process, the leadership should work diligently to make the will of the people the law of the land.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. Schubert?
A slight quibble. I'm not sure that it was to drain the strong countries for the benefit of the weak. I think it is the globalists basically trying to get to their one world government, and they are trying to form these unions, just as the North American Union was going to eliminate borders between Canada and Mexico and the US. How's that eliminating the southern border working out for us? I would say not real well at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Brown, what is your position on the death penalty?
We need the death penalty.
And at one time, I would have strongly agreed. And if you happen to have someone in the act of committing a heinous crime and they happen to die because somebody stops them, so be it. But I have seen far too many cases of innocent people framed to take it lightly. Right next door to Union County and Anson County, an 80-year-old lady was bludgeoned to death, and the SBI agent quickly picked up the culprit, who was a mentally handicapped individual, but they couldn't kill him because he was too handicapped to stand trial, so they sent him to Dick's for 10 years. A neighbor of mine noticed there was something funny about the confession. The guy couldn't possibly have given it. And it ended up in a court in Durham where the judge said, strange things happen in Anson County. The case was thrown out with prejudice because everybody agreed that the confession was false. But Roy Cooper's SBI did not fire the agent who made up the confession. They didn't prosecute him for perjury. They reassigned him to investigate Medicaid fraud. And when his supervisor was asked how you can commit perjury in a trial and not be punished, the supervisor was reassigned to investigate Medicaid fraud.
Thank you.
There's more.
Follow-up comments?
My only comment is that Fern's point is well taken, that partisan politics has no place in the prosecutorial process in our courts.
Thank y'all. Candidates 4 and 6, please. Okay, Mrs. Rivenbark, how should we tackle our national debt?
50% of our spending goes to programs like Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. We need to start with repealing Obamacare. That's first and foremost. The federal government has no place in healthcare. We need a free market-based system, and that will help us tremendously. Second, we need to defund Planned Parenthood and all abortions from the federal government. In Charlotte, right on Latrobe Street, we are home of the largest abortion clinic in all of the Southeast. That clinic makes $4 to $5 million per year, killing 150 to 200 babies a week. We've got to stop funding that. We also needed to audit the Fed and audit the Department of Defense. As someone who works with the Department of Defense, God bless them, I love them for what they do. We need to change that mentality of how we're spending our money. I actually spoke to a surgeon from JMAL, which is a special operations organization, and they said, you know, your product works really great, we really love it, but we have the ability to medevac someone from downrange over to Germany and then over to Womack, and then you can heal them in 3 days and we can send them back. We just need to shift that mentality and make sure that we're auditing and spending money efficiently.
Thank you. Mr. Rush?
Cut spending and economic development. That's how we do it in Union County, and it works. I do want to go back to something that was said earlier about Brexit. With Brexit, you have the will of the people for it.
Mr. Rush, that's going to be your next question.
Oh,
is that okay?
That'll be fine.
All right. Do you have anything else on the
I'm
national
good. I'm ready for the next question.
Ms. Rivenbark, do you have anything else on the national debt before we?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, then we'll address this to Mr. Rush, and you must have been looking at the plan. What kind of relationship should the U.S. have with the U.K. after Brexit?
We should have the best relationship we can have with any country. Now, the 9th District, we have our own case where the will of the people was thwarted right here in the 9th District. If governments learn that they can do this without consequence, then we'll continue to see this happen all over the world. In the 9th District, we duly elected a representative, not once but twice, and they came and took that away from us. And we shouldn't stand for that, and they shouldn't be standing for it in England. If we're going to have the type of government that we have, it has to mean something. I was on a team that came in Bill Broughtley's race here, 305 illegal votes, wrongfully cast votes, voter fraud, whatever you want to call it, here in Mecklenburg County. One lady lives in New York, voted, intends to vote again if they'll send her a ballot. That's crazy. And yet, we selectively persecute only one county. Bladen County doesn't have a Republican on the Board of Elections right now. Bladen County doesn't have a polling place open except for 8:30 to 5.
Thank you, sir.
We should pursue a strong alliance with the United Kingdom, most certainly. But one of the things that's not been brought up is that the agriculture community in North Carolina makes up for about $4 billion in exports. Much of that goes to or comes from Canada, Mexico, and China. So we need to make sure, and really 2 of those are in the top 25% of the most exported goods in the United States of America, being pork and tobacco. So we need to obviously support that alliance with the United Kingdom, but I think even more so we need to become more self-sufficient. We are a grain deficit state, which basically means that we produce more grain than we need, whereas Mississippi is actually exporting a great amount of grain. I think that what we need to start looking at is how can we help each other state to state rather than how we can help other countries.
Any follow-up, Mr. Rush?
No.
Okay. Thank y'all. Okay, candidate 1 and 4, please. I'm sorry. 1 and 4. Yes. Mr. Dunn, how big a threat is socialism to this country, and how do you plan on combating it?
Well, I think I first have to define socialism. That means where everybody gets to share in everybody else's wallet and in their labors and efforts. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's a threat.
Okay, Mr. Rush.
You go home tonight, turn on the television, show your children what has happened in Venezuela. That's the best way to do it. We have to educate our kids. If we don't, there's a lot of other people who are willing to do it for you. They keep them every day. They can tell them whatever they want. They go to this university down here where we had a shooting today. They can teach them whatever they want. And we don't spend enough time with our kids teaching them what our parents taught us and their parents taught them. If you don't believe socialism is the #1 threat to this country, again, turn your television on when you go home tonight. Watch what's happening in Venezuela. It ain't gonna work, no matter how many times it's tried. Didn't work in Russia. Communism, socialism. If it didn't work at Plymouth Rock, when the Pilgrims came over, they almost starved to death because some would work, some wouldn't. That's why they had the first Thanksgiving, because everybody finally had to bear the fruits of their own labor. And when they did that, they had an abundance. Like Stevie was talking about with agriculture. When you get the fruits of your own labor, you have an abundance, and that's what we got to get back to. Teach your children that.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn, any follow-up comment?
How long do I have? Somebody count this down. I think that our children are much smarter than we give them credit for. They now have access to every single piece of information on the planet in their hand. I think that my kids, and probably your kids, will not go through anything that says, well, oh, if I work for it, I don't get it. No, if I work for it, I'll get it.
Thank you. Mr. Rushton, how should the U.S. engage with an increasingly divided EU?
I don't know that we should. I think it's up to them to declare their destiny, determine their destiny, and then adapt to whatever they determine. Just like with any country, whether it's an enemy or a friend, it's not our business to get in everybody else's business. It's our business to protect what we have here at home and understand and work on our economy and work on our relationships on a basis determined by what they want to do.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
As of this day, I import about $7 million a year in foreign goods. I have companies and factories all over the world. I have trade partners. Trade is good for everybody, whether it's domestic, if it's here in Union County or Mecklenburg County. Trade is good for both sides.
Follow up, Mr. Rushton.
I agree, trade is very important. One of the things we can't do is keep trading our national security for cheap labor from Central America. We have to secure our borders. We are aborting our workforce in order to bring cheap labor across the border. We have to stop doing that. And it's very important. Trade is important. It's very important to the 9th District.
Thank y'all. Candidates 2 and 5, please. Ms. Schubert, in your mind, what are the core values of the Republican Party?
Basically protecting the Constitution, protecting the right to life, protecting liberty.
Okay. Mr. Rodenow, I'm sorry.
Sure, thank you. I think that Republicans' core values, so we have core values in the Marines, honor, courage, and commitment. And those 3 core values of honor, courage, and commitment, they don't act independently of the others. You're courageous because you have honor, and you have honor in that, and you're committed to maintaining that honor. Right, so similarly, our Republican values, they don't operate independently. Things like fiscal conservatism, limited government, personal responsibility, those aren't siloed philosophies, right? Those are things that all operate and are intertwined. We want to be fiscally conservative because that helps us limit the size and scope of government. We want people to be personally responsible for their actions, good and bad, because that then requires less government intervention in their lives, handouts, hand-ups, whole 9 yards, and that then, of course, helps us be fiscally conservative. So I think that those core values of fiscal conservatism, limited government, personal responsibility, are not separate and equal core values. I think that they are all equally important and work together for the betterment of our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
A little bit. When the Constitution was adopted, there was quite a debate, and because of that, we have the Bill of Rights. That's an integral part, and it ties in with what he was talking about. We have a fundamental form of government in this country which we are in danger of losing, and it's very important that the Republican Party recognize the intent of the Constitution and how far we have strayed from it. And one quick 10-second on the last answer. The court, after the case was thrown out with prejudice, the attorneys for that man who was incarcerated for a decade roughly on totally phony charges sued Anson County in the state of North Carolina and recovered roughly $10 million. But there's no consequence for those responsible for that travesty of justice.
Thank you. Mr. Ridenhour,
Sir.
how much of a priority is a deficit-neutral tax plan to you?
A deficit-neutral tax plan. Boy, wouldn't we like to have a revenue-neutral tax here in Mecklenburg County with our new Board of County Commissioners? So I think it is very important to have a deficit-neutral tax. I think that essentially what I'm getting, it almost ties into the previous question, right? In the sense of fiscal conservatism. When we have a government body, whether it's locally here in Mecklenburg County or whether it's in Washington, D.C., spending, getting the budget out of whack, that helps fuel some of the problems we face in other areas in our country, right? It's not a single issue. It trickles down through other social issues and other federal departments and on down to the local level. I think that we should be responsible as government leaders to bring that fiscal conservatism and being fiscally responsible to you, the taxpayer.
Ms. Schubert?
Addressing the deficit is one of my key concerns, but you have to be careful. The devil's in the details, and the details in marketing or propaganda, what does it really mean? It's like, we need a balanced budget amendment. Well, you can balance the budget by jacking taxes up to 100% of everything, but I think it's going to tank the economy pretty quick. You have to grow the economy. You have to reduce the debt as a percentage of the economy. And yes, you do need to cut back the size of government. We cannot forever run up a debt. It's sort of like when you run up your credit card, eventually the people extending the credit cut you off, and it's really painful.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I think it's important also to note that there is a difference between the deficit, the national deficit. I know you all are educated on these issues, but there's a difference between the national debt, the $22 trillion of national debt, and our budget deficit. Neither is good, but I think we also need to be working towards that $22 trillion of debt that we're mortgaging on the backs of our kids. I've got Caroline, who's 4, Hobson, who's 21 months old. They're not going to pay off that debt. Their kids probably won't either, and we all know that. We keep sending people to Washington, D.C. who would say they're going to address the national debt, and they never do. It keeps on going up, doesn't it? It does every single year. We keep raising the debt ceiling. Folks, that is not sustainable. A general, escapes my mind, about a decade ago, said the number one threat is a general, I think it was SOCOM, said that the number one threat facing the United States is our national debt. He didn't say Russia, didn't say China, our debt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, candidates 3 and 6, please. Ms. Brown, how would you use your office to improve transportation and infrastructure in the 9th District?
I think infrastructure is one of the few issues in front of the Congress currently that could actually gain enough bipartisan support to get traction going if the Democrats would stop trying to pin the president for something he never did. When you look at what our needs are in this district, you see that Charlotte never did receive as much road money as Raleigh. 485 took forever to build, still isn't done, for my opinion. You've got Union County that has very uneven roads, and I'm very appreciative for the work that Fern's done in the past. It finally got the bypass to reality. Then you go further out into Anson County. Wadesboro is trying desperately to do some economic development, but you've all sat on 74 there right in front of the You Are So Special Beauty Salon, going to the beach or back, and you can't get through Wadesboro, so you wonder how in the world can economic development happen. So what's got to happen, and of course you add on the other counties as well, what we have to have is somebody that goes to the table and makes sure that the funds happen and that they are proportionately put out into these areas. You don't put all the money in Charlotte, you don't put all the money in Robinson County, you've got to make sure each area has an opportunity.
If this question is, what would I do as a congresswoman, I think this goes back to an earlier question of making sure that the federal government doesn't overreach its boundaries. And so I do believe this is primarily a state issue. I'm in favor of block grants for something like for federal funds in terms of transportation to be dealt with at a state level. But for me in Fayetteville, it's actually a really important issue. We've been hit by hurricanes 2 years in a row. We still have people living in hotels after the devastation. Our government in North Carolina has spent less than 1% of the federal funds that were provided to them to repair our roads and to repair our homes, and they still have yet to do so. So I think that what we need to do is make sure that we're applying pressure from a federal level. If we're going to give you that kind of funding, you need to make sure that I can still drive through my neighborhood, which today, 2 years later, we still have a great crater in the middle of the road in my neighborhood that we can't drive through.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Anything else? Okay, Ms. Rivenbark, what do you see as the biggest threat to the United States?
AOC, the crazy leftist agenda. You know, the unfortunate fact is people buy into her craziness. You know, we can sit here and laugh and think she's crazy and Elizabeth Warren is crazy, but look at Ilhan Omar, who's actually doing fundraising with terrorist groups. That's happening in the United States of America. 60 years ago, my mother was hiding under a desk preparing for drills from a potential nuclear attack from communism. And today we're electing them into Congress. And folks, if you have children and grandchildren, you should be scared. Socialism is real, it's here, and it's time for us to stop it.
I would say we have a societal issue with rhetoric and with political correctness, which has told us that anybody who doesn't agree with us 100% is the enemy and must be destroyed, which has caused us to fail to call out things like the anti-Semitism that Omar preaches non-stop and fails to apologize for, things that are causing you to find somebody with whom you disagree and then you unfriend and you block and you cut them out of your life. We're never going to have a country that operates properly and that can come together in times of crisis and in times of joy if we can't learn how to see one another as human again. And I do believe that your representative should be somebody who leads the way with a rhetoric that is direct and firm, but yet does not scream and yell and call names, which is what has happened so much on the progressive left. To accept criticism when it comes in, to learn from it, and to lead others in a place that makes everything better for everyone.
Thank you. Follow up?
Great point. I was born on WIC and welfare back in 1987. My father had nothing more than an 8th grade education, went on to open a business right up the road in Charlotte, later in Raleigh and in Jacksonville, Florida. We live the American dream. That's what this campaign is all about. That's what we need to bring back to the United States of America, is the reality that we can do anything in this country that we want to do if we work hard and persevere, and that's everything the Democrats don't want people to know.
Thank you. Okay, candidates 1 and 5.
Okay, number 5 instead of.
Okay, Mrs. Schubert, how should our immigration system be fixed?
For starters, secure the border. And yes, we have a lot of people that come in on visas and overstay. We have a system that basically encourages people to break our laws. As long as you reward people for coming here illegally, more people are going to come here illegally. Who can blame them? We have a Congress that is dysfunctional. I sometimes wonder, since recent testimony suggests the cartel bribed the former governor of Mexico, how many other people they would be talking to, and would we do anything different? You cannot continue the present system. The numbers say if you keep letting people come here illegally, eventually you lose control. The Tower of Babel did not work in the Bible. It does not work here. We are becoming more and more divided as illegal immigration continues.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
This is the only country in the world that has fences built to keep people out. Gee whiz. Every other country in the world keeps people in with fences. I applaud America for being gracious. I applaud America for being successful. I applaud America for being compassionate. I applaud the fact that people want to come here, okay? Out of the millions of people that show up in our country, they're not all bad. They're not all after our jobs. You know, every time we have a spurt of immigrants coming into our country, our economy does better. Now, there are some bad apples in the group, and yes, we should say, hey, we should deal with them. But that doesn't mean we should say close our borders, or that doesn't mean that we should say, hey, don't come here anymore. No, come here and we will weed out the bad ones, and we'll continue to do it.
Thank you. Ms. Hubert.
The point is illegal. If somebody breaks down my door to come in, they are not a welcome guest. It's that simple. And yes, we're a wealthy country. But I got into this issue years ago because of calls from public health people that went out to provide visits at the homes and were amazed at how wealthy the poor people had become. I got into it because of school teachers who could not run a class because there were so many children. It's not they just wouldn't obey the teacher. They didn't have a clue what the teacher was saying. We are the lifeboat. If we sink, who is going to help the rest of the world? The point is not to hurt people. The point is to prevent people from hurting themselves.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dunn, how do you feel about amnesty for illegal immigrants?
America does not grant economic sanctuary. America grants political sanctuary. America has a policy that if you come here, we will accept you, no matter what the situation, unless you come here as a criminal or to do us harm. And in that case, we will find you and we will send you back or prosecute you.
Ms. Schubert?
I think I mentioned it earlier, if crime pays, you get more crime. If you reward breaking our laws, you get more people breaking our laws. And you create horrible situations, like what do you do with children who were brought here and they had nothing to do with it. But then you go back, if somebody robs a bank and their family really likes the money, does the family get to keep it when you find the person that robbed the bank? If you come home from being away and somebody's moved into your house and they really like it, do they get to keep it? If you're a nation of laws, then you need to enforce the laws. If you want different laws, you need some different laws.
Thank you. You want to respond?
Yes, immigrants are not criminals. There will be some people out there, the exceptions to the rule. Please don't make them the poster child for the way America is. We are not in a country of mayhem. We are not in a country of chaos. We are not in a country as you would perceive us to be, as in total disarray. Unless you're watching television or listening to the news 24 hours a day, and then God help us all.
Or unless you just visited San Francisco and Seattle.
Thank you. Okay, candidates 2 and 6, please. Ms. Rivenborn, what degree should federal law enforcement play in local affairs?
None. I'm a big supporter in states' rights, obviously. I think the North Carolina General Assembly has done a great job in ensuring that different sheriff's departments around the state are not able to protect people who come here illegally, because I disagree with Mr. Gary Dunn. If you come here illegally, then you have committed a crime. So, thank you. I'm a big believer in states' being able to determine their own law enforcement policies.
Thank you. Mr. Ridenhour.
Thank you. Could you run that by me one more time?
Yes,
Please?
sir.
Thank you.
What degree should federal law enforcement play in local affairs?
Okay, thank you very much. I, too, am very supportive of the 10th Amendment, the states' rights, powers that are not specifically delegated to the federal government then belong to the states. However, I think I would disagree with Ms. Rivenbark that there is a role in for federal law enforcement in local affairs, citing her own example of 287G. Here in Mecklenburg County, we had a sheriff that was supportive of 287G, and that involved federal law enforcement, right, ICE, to be able to detain and ultimately deport people who had been apprehended here in Mecklenburg County and were found not only guilty of violating the law, the crime here, but then also coming here illegally. So unless I'm misunderstanding the question, I agree with her, but then I ultimately disagree that I think there is a role for the federal government. We look at the FBI and I think there is a role, but I don't think that there is a role for the federal government to dictate to the local municipalities and states what their laws should or should not be. But there are federal laws that can be broken, and in those cases, then federal law enforcement has to be involved.
And I think with the FBI and their witch hunt against President Trump, they really shouldn't be telling us what to do down in Fayetteville.
I have a friend who is an agent, a special agent for the FBI, and I think that bureau is made up of a lot of fine men and women and patriotic Americans, notwithstanding some of their leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ridenhour, what measures would you implement to secure the integrity of our elections?
What would I implement to secure the integrity of our elections? Well, that's a pertinent issue here in the 9th District. I would, again, revert to the 10th Amendment that I think that states ultimately are responsible for implementing the laws and the security of their elections. We have Republicans in the General Assembly who have done an outstanding job of bringing forward voter ID. Of course, liberal courts continue to try to stymie their efforts, but nevertheless, that is a state issue as far as what type of ID and voting hours and all those sorts of things. Those are state issues, and the federal government constitutionally has no jurisdiction in telling a state how they must administer elections. That said, I guess I'll just close with that.
So I absolutely agree. This is where, this is more of a consumer, voter-driven type of policy question. And we've got to get people engaged from different demographics. I mean, I can't really see very well, but my generation is largely absent in this room and in our party. And I think we're going to have to do a better job of engaging minorities, women voters, and young people and future generations, because when we have a 1 to 6 minority in the Supreme Court, we know that we're going to have a problem with the Board of Elections anytime we go to court. That's an issue for us. Again, as Mr. Ridenhour said, I believe it's a state issue, but ultimately it comes down to who's voting and what they're voting for. We know in the state of North Carolina, for example, that we voted for the voter ID, and then our governor tried to veto it and did. And so this is one of those situations where we've got to drive our government to do the right things by engaging voters to vote the right way.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
So the one thing I would add to that in 30 seconds would be that though I don't think that this should be dictated from the federal government, I just want to kind of say this as information. There is incredible technology that we have out there that's available, blockchain technology, which, for example, is virtually unhackable. If we're all on the blockchain, then we would all have to be hacked at the same time in order to change the blockchain. It's virtually unhackable. So there are technologies out there that we can use to secure our election system. You know, there are still counties and cities across the country that are using paper ballots and things like that. I mean, it blows our mind, but it's happening. That is. Yep.
Thank you.
How would we pay for that?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now to the last set of questions for 1 and 6. 1 and 6. Mr. Rivenbark, how would you plan to keep fuel prices low?
You know, we have an issue with Venezuela currently where we're spending $256 million in 2017 for humanitarian aid, and at one point they were the 4th largest producer of oil for the United States. If we're going to give that kind of money to help save the nation, then we need to make sure that we're regulating benefits for us as well.
Mr. Dunn.
I think we should all move to Alaska. Prices are really low on fuel. Taxes on fuel pay almost everything. Wow. I don't think that there's, how do we regulate fuel? Gee whiz, not sure how to do that. I haven't killed any dinosaurs recently.
Any follow-up comment?
I just like to ask why you're here.
Mr. Dunn, kind of a follow-up to that. The last question of the evening. What do you see as the future for American energy?
Well, at the University of Iowa, where I did my not my graduate studies, I was in the graduate group under a fellow by the name of Noah Hershowitz and James Van Allen. They were working on fusion energy, which is putting atoms together and containing them in a plasma bubble about the size of a peanut, that big. I talked to Noah Hershowitz, who's running the Tokamak reactor project now. He spent maybe $1 billion up to $10 billion a year for the last 40 years. And every time I talk to him, he says, well, we're this close. Tomorrow morning, I would put solar on my house if it was affordable. I think that solar, when it becomes affordable, yeah, I'll own it. Water power, that's limited. Wind power, it's limited. What we have is coal. What we have is nuclear. I, turn on my lights, nuclear is there. Thank you.
First of all, global warming is something that is completely fabricated by the left to scare you, and we need to, I disagree with Mr. Dunn because I believe that solar energy has actually become very affordable because of the government's willingness to incentivize people like Dan McCready to start solar energy companies. So by disincentivizing those groups, we can, number one, put Dan McCready out of business, so he can't afford to run a robust campaign against us. And then I think we need to look into nuclear energy options in the future.
Mr. Dunn, 30 seconds.
Wow. As I said, the day that solar energy is affordable, every single person on the planet will go out and buy it. It's not. It's subsidized by the government. It's researched, paid by the government. When that changes, I'll be owning it. When it becomes feasible, I'll be there.
There was a salesman in my neighborhood 2 weeks ago who offered it to me for free, and I passed.
Okay. Thank y'all. Please. I'm sorry. 1 through 6. Okay, starting with candidate 1 through 6, if you'll just go, what do you want? 1 minute? 2 minutes? Okay.
Two minutes of anything that I want to say. Does anybody out there have any questions for me? Yes.
I would really like a follow-up to Stevie's question. Why are you here? And the only reason I ask that, Mr. Dunn, is that the questions that you all take a lot out of your time to come and do these forums, they are viable questions that we as voters would like to hear answers to. And sometimes when you do not give a response, it is something that myself as a voter would question. Why wouldn't you give an answer to that question? So why are you here in that response?
The questions that you've been given are great questions. It would take, let's say, an entire Congress, all their aides, and 100 years to answer each one effectively and thoroughly. I want to tell you that I'm not that smart. The questions are varied, they're important, they're relevant. It would take me weeks to do research on each one to give you a fair answer. And when it comes up in Congress, guess what? I'll spend the time. I'll spend the weeks. I'll hire the staff. I'll employ the people that are grad students and professors that have answers that aren't just off the cuff. I don't have those. If you think that I have that many answers or I'm that smart, I wouldn't be here. Nobody would be in this room if any of us were that smart. These are very complex questions which involve not just, oh, I've got a snap answer. Well, I don't have any snap answers for any of them. But I know that I can work at them and find them. And I can represent you to your best interest. That's why I'm here. Any other questions before I think I've added my, am I out of time yet, please?
You're out of time.
Thank God.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Candidate 2.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Matthew Ridenauer. I'm going to get out here. It's that entire standing behind the podium. You probably heard and sounded like I was a broken record, continually referencing the Constitution in my answers. Well, that's not constitutionally mandated. Well, according to the Constitution, because ultimately, I think that if we go back to the Constitution and the way that the nation was intended to be organized and how the nation was to be governed, the way the founders set it up, brilliant people. I think that if we would go back to our little more constitutional limits of government, I think we would find ourselves out of a number of these messes. We wouldn't find ourselves spending the money that we're spending on social programs these days. I think that we'd find a way to strengthen our military and understand that we need to have the most powerful military in the world to protect this exceptional United States. But at the same time, we also need to be engaging in trade with our global trade partners. Folks, I have stood my entire life in service of our country and my community. When I was in high school, 2 police officers, Barnett and Nobles, were killed in the line of duty. You might remember that. I said, what can I do? I organized the Adopt a Cop program at my high school, middle school, and elementary school. We raised enough money for 11 bulletproof vests. A few years later, I stood up and said, I want to go join the Boy Scouts at the age of 16. By the age of 18, you know what I did? I stood up and I accepted my Eagle Scout. I stood on the yellow footprints in Parris Island, South Carolina, and became a member of the United States Marine Corps, the finest fighting force the United States and the world has ever known. In 2012, I stood to serve the community as a county commissioner here in Mecklenburg County. When the liberal gun grabbers tried to come and take your concealed carry permit holders' ability to conceal carry on our parks and our greenways, you know what I did? I stood, even in the minority, outnumbered 2-1 by Democrats to Republicans. I stood and protected our Second Amendment constitutional rights. We will all answer that we support the Second Amendment. You know what? I've actually defended it in the minority. Guess what the Republicans are in DC? The minority. I have stood time and time again for our conservative Republican principles, and I'm standing before you this evening asking for your votes so I can stand in DC and represent you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
I'm Lee Brown. I am here to ask for your vote this evening to represent you in the 9th Congressional District. As a realtor over 19 years, I've sold over 1,000 houses in this district. What that means is I've sat at kitchen tables of people from all socioeconomic groups, cultures, races, genders, and looked at them, asked them questions to find solutions. Didn't ask them how they voted, although I could look around and tell you, but I didn't ask them because my goal was not to pick a fight. My goal was to find out where we could make something move forward by using education and by using facts and information. I take those same skills into my job as a parent. My family and I were fortunate to go to the inauguration of President Trump. It's one of the highlights of what I've had to experience in life. The day after the inauguration was the Women's March in DC. We were walking from our hotel over to the Smithsonian because it's free, and you're walking through this sea of women, children, and men. My son, who was 10 at the time, was holding my hand because I'm that mom. And we were walking through the crowd, and he said, Mom, if it's the Women's March, why aren't you marching? And I said, baby, among other reasons, it's because they don't allow pro-life women in their group. A woman who was about as far from me as Mrs. Bishop heard me, looked at me, glared at me, and spit at me in front of my 10-year-old son, and started screaming about how I shouldn't try to control her uterus and all this other mess. And so I took my son's hand and I started to walk off, and he said, Mom, why didn't you argue with her? And I said, baby, you can't fix somebody that's filled with hate, but you can choose not to engage with them, and you can choose to stand by your beliefs. So we walked on, and I knew that that was a moment where he would never forget the strength of courage it takes to walk away from a confrontation where sometimes you just won't win, but you do win in the long run by standing tall.
I will bring that educator's mind and that strength of conviction to the 9th District on behalf of every single person who lives here with cheerfulness and with smart so that we can move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us here tonight and listening. Thank you for bearing with my voice. I apologize so much for this. I get Gary a little bit. I get him probably better than you guys get him. I think he gave you probably one of the most honest answers we've heard tonight on any question. I also get the 9th District. The 9th District is a very diverse place. And we have a lot of Democrats and unaffiliateds in the eastern portion of this district that want desperately to find a conservative home that they can come to. But yet, when we have a candidate elected that's acceptable to not only us but them, we throw that candidate away. We can't keep afford to doing that kind of thing. I've got a mailer here from a Republican group out of Washington that called me a tax and spend liberal. This same group spent $7 million against President Trump because they didn't like him. He's not a tax and spend liberal, and neither am I. We cut taxes in Union County 3 of the last 4 years. The only time taxes were increased, I voted against it. But I'm not going to spend $18,000 trashing anybody behind me. I'm going to build myself up. I'm going to call out the truth. Gary just told you a lot of truth. You don't know the answer. You choose whether or not you want to vote for him based on that. I think that's a very good point he made, and it's a good question that you had. We desperately need, as a Republican Party, to find a way to help those in the counties in the East that are Democrat come to a new home, come in and join us for economic development, for low taxes, for conservative values that we believe in, but we don't seem to want to share. Mark Harris was a good man. He didn't do anything wrong. Yet we threw him away. And the Republicans in the state Senate, the state House, did it on December 12th before they heard any evidence of wrongdoing. We should be ashamed of that. We should all be ashamed for not fighting harder, because it's going to be harder the next time. And when President Trump needs our votes and our electoral college votes, get ready to see it again, because they've learned that we'll roll over and take anything. I'm Tony Rush, and I appreciate your vote.
My name is Fern Schubert. I'm a certified public accountant, meaning I'm used to working for the public, not for whichever lobbyist bought dinner last night. When I was in Raleigh, I was part of a small group of people that actually tried to read the bills before they were voting on them. You don't realize how big a business government has become. There's a whole lot of money in government. The richest counties in the country are now the ones around Washington, D.C. And there's a lot more to doing the job than wanting to do a good job. You've heard a lot of good answers tonight, and I really appreciate the people that put this on. I appreciate those of you who took the time to try to come out here and learn something about us. I could start telling you all the wonderful things I've done, starting from the bill that got the SBA to say that I was the accountant that did the most in the whole country for small business, or taking on the trial lawyers for tort reform as a freshman Republican, or being elected Senate Republican whip as a freshman female. Things that are just impossible. But what I'd ask you to do is look at my website, Schubert for U.S. Congress. Please compare what the candidates actually have accomplished. Wanting to do a good job and being able to do a good job are two different things. And I said this at the Young Republicans event earlier. The people on this stage, any one of them, I think, could actually beat Dan McCready. This is a conservative district. This is not a lunatic left, take money from anybody district. You've got some very thoughtful people, and one of my reasons for getting into this race is I think we have been treated so poorly a lot more people are engaged. They're actually thinking about who they're going to vote for. And I would ask you to study the candidates, and I hope after you do that, you will vote for me and get some other people to vote for me, because I really think I could do a good job for you in Washington. Thank you.
We are facing infanticide in the United States of America today. In New York and Virginia, they think it's okay to allow for the murder of children as long as they lay on a table comfortably. So first of all, I want to commend Senator Bishop today for standing up for what's right. He does a great job in the General Assembly, and we need him there, and we need more people like him there. In 2012, I was hit in a car collision, head-on, by some street racers who were going about 120 miles an hour, and they both died instantly. The only reason that I'm here today is because the good Lord wanted me to be. I spent 2 weeks in the ICU and ultimately faced a decision of whether or not I would pursue my own health care or take care of my unborn child. And I chose life. And today I am the proud mother of 2 wonderful children. And why does that matter to you? Because today in the state of North Carolina, we actually had to even have that conversation of whether or not we will uphold the sanctity of life. And that's a discussion that we're facing at a federal level. And the National Institute of Health says that the absence of life is when we can no longer detect heartbeat or brain waves. Then that needs to also be the definition of the beginning of life. And we're going to start there when I'm your Congresswoman and overturning Roe versus Wade to protect life, protect the unborn. And when nobody was around to give me a vote or a big PAC check or a pat on the back, in the darkest moments of my life, I made the right choice. And I am a testament to why choosing life is so important. My name is Stevie Rivenbark. I invite you to visit stevieforcongress.com, and I hope you'll join us in our fight. Thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you for coming out to tonight's debate. First off, we'll give a nice warm round of applause to all our great candidates on this. I think this went well, answered a lot of really tough questions, and hopefully everyone got a lot of insight into the policy goals of the candidates on stage. We got a couple thank yous. First off, our moderator, Tony Long, and our timer, Sarah Lee. Thank all of you for coming. We also need to thank Matthew's police officer in the back, who has been watching over us, just making sure everyone stays in their So again, thank you all for coming. Shameless plug, there is MMRC sign-up sheets outside, and if you haven't registered to vote, we have registration outside as well. Early voting is going on right now in Matthews Library and the Mint Hill Library, so if you haven't voted, please go vote, and we hope you all get home safely. Thank you.